as I was saying, this webinar is being recorded and will be available online afterwards, and so will the slides. So, as you probably already know, the heating and cooling sector currently represents almost half of the energy demand in Europe, of which 84% comes from burning fossil fuels, while only 16% is being generated from renewable energy sources. This is why the EU institutions have been working for a few years now to increase the share of renewables in heating and cooling. But more of this will be said during the three presentations we have planned. So after listening to these three presentations, you should thus have a better idea of the EU policy framework in place for heating and cooling, but also thanks to the introduction of the related concepts, we will also have the chance to reflect on how innovative solutions can be developed in order to incorporate renewables and low-carbon energy sources into heating and cooling systems. Our first guest here with us today giving a presentation is Eva Roos, who is a renewable heat expert and policy officer at DG ENER, European Commission. Mrs. Roos will present to us the measures taken at the European level to support and increase the decarbonization of the heating and cooling sector. But as mentioned just before, this increase of ambition in the heating and cooling sector is not only visible at the EU level, but it's also already happening on the ground. This is why we will have two more presentations. First, we will hear Roberto Garay, coordinator of the Related project, to present to us an overview of the Related ultra-low district heating concept and approach. And finally, the last speaker will be Ljubica Vladic from Beolectrain in Serbia to present how the Related concept is being tested on the ground in Belgrade. Belgrade actually happens to be a recent Covenant of Mayors signatory. So this is also a nice way to do this Related Covenant of Mayors webinar. Are all the speakers here with us now? Maybe you can quickly show yourself with the webcam and put your microphones on just to say hi.
Good morning.
Good morning. Lisa, good. We have Philip and Mrs. Roos with us. I know they were discussing and getting ready for the webinar, so. Mrs. Roos.
Good morning.
Are you here as well?
I am here. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Okay, good. So you can for now close your microphones and webcam, all of you. Just before passing the floor to Mrs. Roos, I want to do a short poll with you to make sure you're awake and ready for what will happen. So here you see the question I want to ask you. According to you, what is the biggest barrier that the heating and cooling sector will have to overcome in the coming years to become more sustainable? You will have several answers to choose from. In a few seconds you will see the poll on your screen. Okay, now you should see it. And please choose one of the four answers. So what is the biggest barrier, the biggest challenge in the heating and cooling sector to become more sustainable? Is it the technical barrier, technology? Is it the regulatory barrier? So the legislation, the social barrier, social behaviors, or the economic barrier, the price of the technology and infrastructure. I'll give you a few more minutes to answer this. see more of you are still answering. So I'll wait a few more seconds. Okay. Are you done? Okay, let's close the poll and see the results. So we have, actually it's pretty cool. So most of you don't think it's a technology, and I think we can agree with that, and you'll see why in a few minutes with the presentations. But you're not decided between legislation, social barrier, or economic barrier. Well, that's very interesting for us to know. Thank you for playing the game and answering this. I'm sure these will come back at some point in the presentations. Close it for now. Good. So thank you for this, and now I leave the floor to Mrs. Serrajos for her presentation. Thank you for being here.
Good morning.
Put your slides on.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me all. First of all, let me express my pleasure to be here and participate in this discussion with the cities or the Covenant of Mayors office. Cities and municipalities are really crucial for heating and cooling and the transition of this sector towards a decarbonized energy system. They are the ones that are going to bear the most of the burdens and where the action will have to lie. And so they are absolutely instrumental for the heating and cooling transition, and I hope they will be able to take advantage of all the instruments that EU policies provide them to do this quite formidable task. So in my presentation, which is not very long, so I don't have that much time, I will focus on basically the current EU framework for heating and cooling. And I have to start with a couple of key remarks that are important to understand the challenges for action in this sector. The heating and cooling sector is very big. It is a very large sector, as was mentioned. It is 50% of the EU energy consumption, both final and primary. It is a very diverse sector and very local. Because of this diversity and local nature of heat, which is a product that cannot really be transported more than 440, or I would say the extreme limit that I know is 100 kilometers. This sector has been below the radar of EU policies, which are dealing with mainly in the electricity traditionally on cross-border issues. That means those sectors that have cross-border infrastructure and more national and EU scope in terms of production and consumption. Heating and cooling is also a very cross-cutting domain. That means that to have a successful policy for heating and cooling, one needs to look at many legislative and non-legislative instruments, both at EU level and also in national and regional level, to mention a few the key principles for heating and cooling transition towards a clean energy system is basically one that relates to the supply side, what kind of energy resources we use for heating and cooling, to produce heating and cooling, and on the demand side, how to integrate this into our demand elements, such as the buildings consumption or industrial consumption, anywhere where heating is used. So that means that renewable energy or the fuel sources, decarbonized fuel sources and energy sources for heating is as important as the demand side, how efficient is this consumption and how the consumer, the actual heat consumer, is ready to switch to new clean sources, and how the equipment in the consumer side can be prepared for the transition. So we will at least have to look at the renewable energy policies, we will have to look at the energy efficiency policies, and in this context, since we are with cities, I think we can focus on buildings, but also not just renewables, but other decarbonized fuels availability. And then another big core block to this is financing. So the transition will require us to switch the fuel, switch the equipment where these fuels are used, and adapt the consumer side equipment, such as buildings, to this new type of supply. It is also a very new policy area due to this locality. That means the importance of subsidiarity principle that is applying to anything that is local. As I said, EU have not really tackled heating and cooling as such. So a holistic approach looking at this issue more closely has been started only in 2016, and that means that this is a policy area where we have just started to develop our policy thinking, not only in the EU side, but I believe also in the EU member state side. So therefore, there is quite a big room for further development of policies and finding a concrete solution how this very daunting task can be done. This is a very difficult task because, as I mentioned, heating and cooling is a very large sector, 50%. That means more than 500 MTOE of energy consumption. Most of it is still based on fossil fuels. The latest statistic shows that the renewable component is around 19%, and the gap comes between the around 75% and 90% from other non-fossil solutions such as nuclear energy. So the first basically look at this sector was in 2016 in the EU Heating and Cooling Strategy, which has produced a couple of key principles and overarching tools and solutions. And many of these ideas have been translated into legislation in the Clean Energy Package. In many of the Clean Energy Package legislative pieces, it is not just one or another directive, it is basically almost all of them that are relevant for this field. But basically, the key recognition has been in the last 2-3 years, and also in the Clean Energy Package, that since this sector is so big, that progress has been so slow to move it from fossil fuels and from efficient consumption and production, something has to be done. and therefore it has been tackled in the package in quite a decisive way. So if we would like to understand what are the tools and legislative provisions and instruments for heating and cooling, I should first mention the new Renewable Energy Directive, because for the first time it sets a specific target for this sector in terms of renewable energy shares, but these are very much linked to energy efficiency. Another equally important instrument is the Energy Performance of the Buildings Directive, and I have been very pleased to see in the project on which we have an article here that they see really the connection between efficient district heating and cooling and nearly zero energy buildings. So indeed, it's not sufficient to look at the supply side, we have to look at the demand side, and the two has to work together. The third piece of legislation is the Energy Efficiency Directive and its amendment. Equally important are the new electricity market design, mainly the new directive and the new regulation, and the new governance regulation. So out of these instruments, the new Renewable Directive is new. So it is a recast, but basically has made so many changes to the current directive that we can consider it new. The Energy Performance of Buildings Directive has been amended, so the amendment stands with the directive that should be read together, the old and the amendment. And the same is true for Energy Efficiency Directive, because the revision was only partial, so not all the articles have been reviewed. The new governance regulation is completely new. So we need to keep in mind that at least these instruments have to be looked at for heating, and when someone is looking at policies and actions on heating and cooling. I should also mention that part of this multi-dimensional nature of the heating and cooling sector is that it's not just the legislation that contains concrete provisions, but also the financing framework and the enabling framework needs to be looked at. The key enabling framework element is the financing tools, instruments that the EU provides. And here I need to mention the European Structural and Investment Funds, which has 5 funds within, but 2 are particularly important, the European Regional and Development Funds and the Cohesion Funds. There has been a new fund added under the Juncker Commission, the European Fund for Strategic Investment. This has financed many projects on renewable heating and cooling and efficiency of heating and cooling. Around 22% of this fund has been spent on energy, not all of them heating and cooling, but heating and cooling had its fair share. And the third key funding instrument here is the EU Research and Development Programme Horizon 2020, which have supported many useful projects on heat decarbonization, and the project that we are discussing today here is one of the examples. I have to also say that the current financing framework is being revised to prepare it for the next period between 2021 and 2027. And it is important to highlight that this new budget for the EU has actually scaled up financing possibilities and funds for clean energy, climate change issues. And these increased budget possibilities will apply also for heating and cooling. Now, this is just the proposal, but I think it's important to go through. These proposals are being discussed now with the co-legislators, but I need to highlight that funding for clean energy, climate change investment will be, as we propose, significantly increased in the European Regional and Cohesion Funds. That actually one of the main instruments that gives funding possibilities for municipalities and cities and regions. And 273 billion euro out of this vast budget, 30% was proposed to allocate for clean energy and climate investment funding. We also have prolongation of the Juncker Fund. The official name is, of course, European Funds for Strategic Investment, in the form of the EU Invest Fund, which also allocated in our proposal quite substantial sum. I should mention Horizon Europe, which the new research and development program for the next period, and out of the almost 100 billion euro, 15 billion euro is earmarked for energy, climate and mobility investment. We have a new window for renewable energy under the Connecting Europe facility. This facility is mainly designed for financing cross-border infrastructure, but under the new window that we propose, also not just the infrastructure element, but the generation element for renewable energy can be financed, provided that 2 or 3 member states do a common investment project. Last but not least, I need to mention the new environment and climate action funding, which also will provide substantial resources from small-scale energy efficiency and renewable projects. If we look at the new Renewable Energy Directive very quickly, I go through, it is important to realize that the provision that is going to drive also district heating development is the overarching mainstreaming renewable energy into heating and cooling article, which is Article 23, because it requires that member states shall endeavor to increase the share of renewable energy in heating and cooling by 1.3 percentage point. So this is an article designed to make member states address heating and cooling with specific measures. And they will have to include these specific measures in their national energy and climate plans under the governance framework. Of course, that's the main article, and there are many flexibilities which I will not discuss today, but the main driver is there. Member states have to basically address heating and cooling and put in place targeted policies in case they haven't done it so, and actually very few member states have done that so far. Going to the district heating and cooling provisions. So now we have in this directive a dedicated article for district heating and cooling, which finds its reason in the fact that district heating is a prospective, promising tool to become one of the key elements of heat decarbonization and also cooling decarbonization, although cooling is quite minor today. There again, there is basically a driving provision that requires member states to increase, I have to go to this, to increase the share of renewables and waste heat and cold by at least 1 percentage point per year. This is a provision that is optional. That means that there are 2 choices for member states. Either they implement third-party access or they do this 1 percentage point annual increase. Nevertheless, the message is quite clear that district heating and cooling systems needs to be transform themselves, so they can only fulfill their role that we have seen is a possibility for this instrument if they transform into a decarbonized modern system, which today is not really the case, because district heating, as the large part of the heating sector itself, is still very much based on fossil fuels, and many systems are not really modern, and they need to be refurbished. And the new district heating that we envision is basically quite different from the ones that overwhelmingly we can find in member states. So this is a promise or a perspective for district heating and cooling, and it is very encouraging to see that there are many initiatives in this field to help transitioning and make district heating not just bigger within the heat market if they are efficient and renewable based, but also more modern and adaptive. There are many other important elements in the Renewable Energy Directive, but perhaps the most important here is that these measures on heating and cooling and district heating and cooling needs to be included in the national energy and climate plans. And these plans are very important because they are going to provide programs for member states and the EU how to actually implement the clean energy package. And the clean energy package, we also should not forget, is one milestone, one step towards achieving a net zero carbon energy system and economy by 2050. So this is very important that these national plans and the measures and the trajectories and let's say national contributions or even targets on renewable energy and district heating and cooling should be clearly outlined there. Other important elements are that we should not forget that there is a new dimension to become much more transparent on the performance of district heating and cooling, for consumers to be able to see whether they are actually contributing to greening the heating sector. And it is the energy performance that combines energy efficiency and renewable energy, and the share of renewable energy in the future will need to be spelled out clearly for consumers to understand what is the supply structure. I will not cover the disconnection and the other provisions, third-party access in detail. You will have my slides that you can read, but I think it's important to clarify that the disconnection only applies under our directive to so-called efficient district heating and cooling systems. That is defined in the Energy Efficiency Directive, and also now it was put in the Renewable Energy Directive. So this is not applying to all systems, but only the non-efficient systems. And on third-party access, it is important to note that this is quite not a liberalization, really. The idea is to allow waste heat and renewable suppliers to access the district networks, the infrastructure. There are exceptions, so it only applies for non-efficient systems again, and there's a threshold that means that for small and medium systems below 20 megawatt, there is no obligation in the directive to apply third-party access. Anyway, this third-party access is optional. Member states can instead do the 1 percentage point increase per year. An important element is that heating and cooling, as it was outlined in the EU heating and cooling strategy, has a big potential to become big participants in the electricity market, to provide balancing and other system services, such as demand response and, as I mentioned, balancing. And for that, we proposed to require district heating system operators and electricity district system operators to get together every 4 years and discuss how they can cooperate in that field, which again can actually produce value for those district heating systems that can do energy storage and can participate in balancing or demand response measures. I will quickly, there are also a couple of waivers in the district heating articles. It doesn't apply for those member states that have basically no district heating sector today. And even if they create one after the entry into force of this directive, they are still not obliged to implement, for example, third-party access and such. And also those member states that have 90% efficient heating systems or 90% of just small systems, they don't have to apply this article except for the 1%, except for the consumer information provisions. I will not go into details, but very important to understand that the clean energy package as such and also the renewable energy directive is very much about consumers and communities. So we propose to make the consumers empowered to participate in this very big change that is ongoing already and that await further our energy system. So therefore they can participate fully in the energy market. Currently this is mainly for electricity, but it's not irrelevant for heating and cooling either. And likewise, renewable energy communities have received very big empowerment provisions, and we believe that they need to play a very important role in spreading and adopting energy efficiency and renewable energy measures. I think on the energy performance of buildings directive and the rest of the relevant pieces of legislation, I would highlight the key relevant provisions. It is important to understand that the energy performance of buildings directive has been revised only partially, so the minimum energy performance requirements, cost optimal methodology and the nearly zero energy building requirement have not changed. However, important new element is that there is a requirement for member states which has been transformed, actually transferred from the Energy Efficiency Directive to do long-term building renovation strategies. The first is due by 30th April in 2024. Sorry, I will give you a revised version and has to be updated every 3 years. Such strategies are very, very big opportunities for cities and communities and stakeholders to participate in their elaboration. And this opportunity should not be missed. Another new element is was the update of the technical building systems provisions, and the electromobility and smart residence indicator has been added. That means that the buildings should be able to become part of the electromobility network, and their adoption of digital technologies for measuring and monitoring building performance is going to become one of the elements that is assessed in buildings performance in addition to energy efficiency and renewable energy component. I would also, on the Energy Efficiency Directive, the main key provision here that also helps district heating and cooling very much is the comprehensive national heating and cooling assessment that member states have to do every 5 years. The first set has been provided in 2015 and the next round of assessment is due by the end of 2020. This article has been actually amended by the Renewable Energy Directive in Article 15 because it made compulsory to also assess the renewable heating and cooling potentials. So map the renewable sources for heating and cooling, and member states should assess how they can integrate this into their heating and cooling consumption and production. Although this article, Article 14, has not been reviewed in the amendment of the Energy Efficiency Directive, its annexes, Annex 8 and 9, are now being amended outside of the Clean Energy Package, and this is mainly to make sure that the next comprehensive national heating and cooling assessment are made in a more useful way and become more comparable. It has clarified a lot of thematics, what should be in this assessment and what the methodology should be. This revision is ongoing, but the purpose is to make these annexes ready for the next round of assessment. And here I need to mention that these assessments are supposed to be done together with local and regional authorities, to the extent that their local and regional assessment can become part of the national assessment. So these national assessment can be composed can be a sum of the local and regional assessment if member states choose so. So again, as with the long-term building renovation strategies, it is very important that stakeholders and local and regional authorities are involved and in the elaboration of this assessment, because they will have an impact on the policies and they will have an impact on what is going to be put by member states in their national energy and climate plans under the governance framework. It's also important to see these heating and cooling assessment together with the long-term building renovation strategies, because one is rather the supply side, the other is the demand side. But in case of heating and cooling, which is so local, so distributed, it takes place in the premises of the consumer in most of the cases, because 90% of the consumption is still in the form of individual heating, only 10% is district heating and cooling. And even district heating and cooling is really, we can say, a decentralized, distributed energy. So it's very important, that has very, very close link with the consumer. It is very important to look at these strategies together and try to align them. I have not put on the slides the new metering articles in the revised or the amendment of the Energy Efficiency Directive, Article 11 and 12, if I'm not mistaken. They are really important, especially for district heating and cooling, and they will require a precise and timely metering and billing of actual heating consumption. And it also has a requirement to disclose the energy mix for heating and cooling, which is complementary with the RED II article that requires to disclose the share of renewables in heating and cooling. New governance regulation, I would like to highlight that the integrated national energy and climate plans are extremely important. We are now received most of the plans from member states. I believe only 3 plans are missing. These are draft plans. The Commission is reviewing them and will provide comments on that for the finalization of these plans by the end of this year. It is again very important that stakeholders and cities municipalities, regions get involved with their government on what concrete heating and cooling measures are going to be put finally in these plans. So here is the structure of these national plans, and the timeline is that we will have the final plans by the end of this year, and there will be a review of this by 2023, but member states will also have to provide progress reports every 2 years. Why this is important? Because, for example, in this progress report, they will have to disclose whether they achieve the 1.3 percentage point or not, and how they are faring on the transition of district heating and cooling and the whole sector towards renewable energy and more energy efficiency. I think I'm already overspent my time. There are slides here on the new multi-annual financial framework and the cohesion fund, which is important to understand that there are going to be available significant amount of resources for good project on heating and cooling, building renovation, and so on. So these are very important for citizen regions and all stakeholders to look at. These are very big documents, but you will need to look at all these instruments together, and if you do this carefully and thoroughly, there will be enormous amount of opportunities to make big progress on heating and cooling and on district heating and cooling, and we perhaps can repeat the success in the electricity sector, where renewable energy is now basically a fact of life, a big market player. It became a big market player from a niche player, and I think that's the kind of revolution that we also need in the heating sector. So thank you very much, and very interested to hear.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hoos, for a very interesting presentation, very comprehensive as well of all the legislations and the funding possibilities for heating and cooling. We already have a few questions. That's it. Actually, one question is just, are we going to share the slides? Yes, as I mentioned at the beginning, you will receive the slides, so don't worry about that. And then we have another question, Mark, I think, by sorry, I cannot say Hungarian, but he's from a municipality here in Budapest, and he says, DHC company is just another company that is interested in selling that is evaluated by financial indicators by the owners, unless they are interested in getting CO2. Our aim could only be to use waste instead of coal or gas. Do you want to comment about this? I'm sorry.
Can you speak a bit louder, because I couldn't hear the question.
A comment instead of a question, but we have a person here saying that a DHC company is just another company interested in selling MW evaluated by financial indicators by their owners, unless they are made interested in cutting CO2. Our aim could only be to use waste instead of coal or gas. So yeah, it's not very question.
Now, I had a question maybe. My name is Philip Dimitriou, by the way. I'm project officer at Federen. Sorry I wasn't here in the beginning to introduce myself. Thank you very much for this presentation, and I actually had a lot of questions before regarding the financing instruments, the new financing instruments, but you already tackled that. Also, you mentioned the enabling frameworks for the member states, so all these points were quite clear in the presentation. With the clean energy package, there is a clear signal to mainstream renewable energy in the heating and cooling sector. But where does energy poverty fit into these targets and support schemes? You already mentioned the approach of empowering energy consumers and communities. Maybe could you maybe go into a bit more detail on those points?
Energy poverty and vulnerable consumers are not tackled in the Renewable Energy Directive RED II, the new one, but there have been included new provisions in the in the Electricity Directive. So these consumers will need to be defined by member states. In the Energy Efficiency Directive, traditionally already before the revision, there has been provisions to basically make sure that as a possibility for member states that the measures that they enact on energy efficiency, and I have to mention that energy efficiency under the Energy Efficiency Directive and the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive also covers most of the time renewable energy in the buildings, especially. That means small-scale renewable energy that are hosted in the consumer site itself. So that directive already required that member states try to do measures in a view that they alleviate energy poverty. On the general term, this is still very much for the member states and actually those actors that are going to put in place concrete heating and cooling strategies to ensure that there is a social fairness element. So the decarbonization cost, the investment that is going to be required, and for example, the switch from fossil fuels such as from coal and gas, which are currently much cheaper in many cases than the renewable solutions. Not all of them, but some of them. So when they enact policies and actually they regulate that, this type of regulation should not really result in putting more burden on the consumers or put burden unevenly, and to ensure that the heat, which is a basic necessity for life, remains completely and fully accessible for everybody. So that's a social fairness issue that will need to be very carefully navigated by member states and cities and municipalities. And we have seen good examples from the Netherlands where the cities are very active in this field and they are fully conscious about the issue of ensuring that when they move the entire system to a new CO2-free, fossil-free basis, this should not result that the low-income consumers suddenly are not able to afford, or suddenly they have to pay much larger portion of their income to this type of spending.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Actually, it seems the participants are wondering about the financial incentives to cut down CO2. Do you have anything to add on this?
So there are many, that was one of the reasons I highlighted the EU financial funds and instruments. Currently, and even more in the future, as we propose, so these are not yet agreed, so we will have to see what comes out. But these funds are available for member states and for their regions, because we should not forget that the cohesion funds and also the regional development funds are very much designed for regions and cities to be used. And the new framework is going to also help to make links between the different funds and put together a good spending or a good program and finance those programs. So this is for the member states to calibrate the use of these funds to support, for example, individual consumers to buy new equipment or to refurbish their buildings, including the technical building systems. We are also working on the so-called smart financing for smart building initiative, which was a communication, was part of the clean energy package. But as a follow-up and the concrete realization of this communication, we have already developed together with the European Investment Bank an instrument for financing platforms that member states can set up. And this is their choice how they spend it. They can provide subsidies for the rollout of renewable heating and cooling technologies and for all the related upgrades of the buildings and consumption sites. They can provide preferential loans, so they are really free to use these funds through many ways to make the cost of capital and the cost of the technologies much cheaper.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Mrs. Roos. We are already quite behind schedule, so I think we will now move on to the next presentation with Roberto Garay on the related project, but Mrs. Roos will stay with us until the end of the webinar, I believe, so if we have other questions on this, we can always come back to it later on. So, hello Roberto, I will now share your presentation.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So, as you said, I'm Roberto Garay. I am the project coordinator of a related project, which is a project of low temperature district heating based on renewable energy sources. I am actually the proud coordinator of 14 companies and research centers who joined us in this endeavor to develop this concept. And this is an ongoing project which should last around 4 years. And of course, it was financed by the European Commission, and they found something interesting in this project, and we hope that we will deliver something which is of interest for our partners, but also for the community around energy in Europe. So, going to what a district heating system is, of course, low temperature if possible. In the end, what I find is that district heatings are efficient systems managed professionally. So we do have a relatively big systems, some of them are bigger than others, obviously, which are managed by district heating utilities who have a crew of professional engineers and maintenance crews to make sure that everything works over time. So, and they have proven efficiency and reliability for decades in many countries in Europe. Okay. The good thing about low temperature district heating is that it builds over an existing system of a reliable system, and it reduces the temperature losses in the heat losses due to temperature levels in the network substantially. Okay. If we go one further step more, and we can use renewable energy sources to decarbonize this kind of district. So if we substitute the gas boiler by waste heat in an industrial facility, this waste heat is virtually free in terms of economical cost in euros, but it's also free or almost free in terms of carbon emissions, for instance. So it serves on one side to decarbonize the network, to reduce operational cost of this kind of district heating, and also to reduce fuel dependency from outside Europe. So we are as a community, the full European Union is spending huge amounts of resources just to pay for energy imports, and that's been okay, but with a steady increase in energy costs over time, it's not substantial at some point, so we need to tackle that also. Okay. So coming to what we are doing about this in Related, we are trying to answer a couple of questions actually. So on one side is that we want to develop a low temperature district heating concept. So the first question we have to answer is how low can we get in terms of temperature levels while still committing to deliver comfort to consumers. Let's say comfort for buildings, but also specifications or temperature levels for industrial facilities. And also interesting question is whether this low temperature means the same for new district heating networks or new networks with low temperature, low energy buildings, or if we need to have something different for existing networks, existing buildings with poorer energy performance, and so on. Then there are a couple of key technologies that we need to develop in order to work on our concept. So that's namely a novel substation concept, the integration of low temperature solar thermal systems into the network, and also the smart use of heat pumps in buildings in order to match different temperature levels between the supply and the consumption points. Okay, and of course we need to test all this. So we have committed a couple of district heating operators across Europe to let us play with the networks, so that we know if the technology works and they know if they are able to reduce temperature levels, so everybody is happy with this. Then, so what's the Related concept? So on one side, it's not so long hierarchized. So we go to the operational principles for district heating systems a couple of decades back. And there was like a big boiler plant, maybe a CHP, providing heat to neighborhoods, which were substantial heat consumers. And all of them were built according to building regulations some decades back. And so they were commonly systems working at, let's say, 80, 85, or 90 degrees. So Related reduces substantially this temperature down to, let's say, 45 degrees or something in that range. And it's no longer hierarchized. Why? Because we do have many different types of consumers on one side. So we do have existing buildings, so they keep having substantial heat loads. But there are also nearly zero energy buildings, so they have not so big heat loads. So maybe some local production may be sufficient for those at some moments in time, but also that local producer will be excedentary in other times, so they need to put it into the network. We are in the transition to plus energy houses. So when you put solar systems on top of an already existing nearly zero energy building or in nearly zero energy building design, you may get excedentary in heat for many times in the year while there's still a heat load in the network. Okay. And then we are putting so many different types of production technologies in the network. So Mrs. Horst already talked about access to third parties to district heating networks, and this is happening more and more. In Europe, we do have consolidated urban environments where factories are quite close to buildings. So it makes sense to make some use of that energy and to reduce the carbon footprint of our district heating networks. And then, of course, there are some other technologies which are also happening over there. So there are experiences in Denmark and in Sweden to recover waste heat from supermarkets and put them into the network. and there are also quite interesting experiences of large solar heating plants and so on. So in the end, it is a more complex environment which needs to be managed. So in terms of temperature levels, what we do have is the traditional heat production plant, and we do have also industrial waste heat and solar thermal plants installed on the network. But as technology development, Related is mostly focusing on the building side of the district heating. So the core of everything is a substation, which allows for we call it triple function substations, because it allows to have the one function which is the traditional one in the district heating, which is get heat from the network and put it into the building. It also allows to manage solar plants in the building, so that's the second function of that. And by matching it with a heat pump system, a reversible heat pump system, it allows to pump heat into the network coming in from cooling applications at building scale. Okay. We are not developing technologies for industrial scale because those are commonly quite case specific, and they vary substantially in installed capacity, temperature levels, type of equipment, and so on. But as those are quite more large scale and so also singular systems, they are commonly done on a case by case engineering basis. But we of course are looking at getting substantial heat injections from industrial waste heat applications. Okay. Then going to the main outcomes of the project. So as said, we are focusing on getting a solution for all the systems. So we are trying to propose heat distribution concepts at 40, 45, 50 degrees for nearly surrounding energy buildings or low urban density areas, but also for existing systems and new systems over existing urban environments. We should notice that most of the building stock in Europe is already constructed. There are many studies over there that say that there is that the majority of buildings that should be the building stock in the 2050, for instance, is already constructed today. So if we want to make a substantial difference for the decarbonization of district heating network, we should focus on existing buildings and existing urban environments. Okay. Then the next point is the development of the technologies I have already said before. Okay, those are the core for getting into prosumer schemes in district heatings, but also key technologies in order to allow the transition between existing district heating and low temperature district heating for existing urban environments. We want to test it in quite different district heating networks. So on one side we have a brand new city actually, and of course a brand new district heating network in Denmark, in Binge, nearby Copenhagen. There is operational district heating with a large share of biomass in Estonia, in Tartu. A really large district heating network in Serbia. The full city of Belgrade is part of Related, and Bioelektrane will have a presentation after myself in this webinar. And a corporate district heating network operated by the Basque government in Spain. So it's a group of 10 to 12 buildings connected to a centralized heating plant, and there we can play at a smaller scale for this project. And we also will test the replicability in 2 European regions, so that's the Basque Country in Spain and the Masovia area in Poland. And what we need to deliver in the end is a profitable low carbon concept for district heating. So district heating operators are facing the reduction of heat loads with the progressive retrofitting of buildings. So they are facing a yearly retrofit of 2-3% of the building stock with a reduction of, let's say, 30, 40, 50% of the heat load of those buildings. So 20, 30 years from now, the heat load of those districts will be 20 or 30% lower than today. And for that, they need to reduce operational costs in these networks. So they have to go low temperature to reduce the network losses, but also they have to low for decarbonized heat sources because they are cheaper. Of course, they are also more sustainable in the long term and for the environment, but in terms of profitability, they are simply cheaper than burning gas or whatever. And also this is interesting because Mrs. Hoss also commented on the possibility to disconnect buildings from district heatings. This is a real risk for some district heating networks because if a building gets substantial lower heat loads with a retrofit and so on, they may find that existing district heating is no longer the best alternative for them. So we must ensure that district heating is the best, let's say, economic alternative for them to heat their houses. And for that, we need to ensure that we provide a fair cost scheme for customers. Then going to the next slide, and of course, we want to increase the share of renewables in the network. So a brief introduction to our networks. I already did some of that. So Binge is meant to host. Binge in Denmark is meant to host some 20,000 inhabitants in the mid-term, let's say 15 to 20 years. Right now it's a small town of 15 to 30 houses. You can see the aerial photo in the slide. So it will be a very interesting place where we will see how low temperature district heating is populated over time and how they need to cope with a long-term energy plan and short-term implementation of heat production facilities to meet the heat loads of buildings. In the case of EURETA in Spain, it's an existing headquarters for the security department of the Basque government. And what we find here is the possibility to meet a place where we can test technologies freely because all the buildings are owned by the Basque government. So they will allow us to put solar technologies and so on and heat pumps freely in the systems and see the profitability of these kind of technologies. And then we go to the bigger network. So Tartu is a modernized district heating with a brand new CHP facility. They operate more than 90% of the heat load with biomass. And it's in cold Estonia, so it's a completely different environment than northern Spain. And the other case is the case of Belgrade, who is a network which is undergoing a major investment in retrofitting of transmission lines and also in introducing many renewable energy sources at the large scale. But they will also test low temperature district heating in some of their subnetworks. So it's a interesting group of networks, quite complementary between them, which will allow us to test many things in the project. For the technologies, I have already talked about this. So we have low temperature solar thermal systems. Actually, the adaptation of existing solar thermal technologies to the district heating environment for integration in buildings. Two partners doing that, one in Spain with this particular case of unglazed solar collector, and the other one in Norway doing glazed collector systems. Then district heating connected reversible heat pumps and actually also electric boosters, and the core of everything, which is the triple function substation, which can be of different sizes. What you can see here is the heat pump, the substation for a small building. Okay, so where are we now? the project started 1.5 years ago, not even that, okay? And we have undergone the part of the planning of the project. We have undergone the development of the concept, which was already done a couple of months ago. And actually, we are lucky because we already have the networks fully instrumented to record all the heat loads occurring during the 18 to 19 heating season. By the end of this year, we will have all the district heat engineering and all the subsystems, technologies designed. And the conversion to low temperature will happen depending on the district even by this the following heating season, so the 2019-2020 heating season or the following one. So we are 1.5 years into the project. We still have 2.5 years to finalize everything. So it's a very interesting moment right now because everything is open, but there are also already many things happening into the project. We also have some production of the reports and research papers and so on that you can find in our website. We disseminate through our website. You find it below, relatedproject.eu, and also our LinkedIn profile, Related Project AIDS 2020, and you can find them in the slide here. So there are 2 public deliverables, one on our district heating concept, the deliverable 2.1, and we will have 5 additional deliverables related to this district heating concept by April. So we will deliver specific connection schemes for different kinds of stakeholders in the district heating scheme. Also, we do have the energy price assessment in deliverable 4.1, which may be of interest. It is a review on existing data on cost of energy for different parts in Europe and also main oil and gas cost over the last 20 years. It should be interesting to say, some of you may also know, that the price of natural gas, the spot price of natural gas in Europe has more than doubled and reduced by more than 50% over the last 10 years or 15 years. And I don't know how district heating operators have a prevision of cost with this kind of volatility in natural gas prices. So low temperature and renewable energy sources also makes it easier for them to have some predictability in the system and avoid nasty situations like having to increase cost to customers due to the volatility of these kind of fossil fuels. Okay. We have also already been present to several conferences. Some of them you can find the papers in the website. You can see them there. And of course, we do have some dissemination materials available on the website. Then we will also have some additional activity for dissemination in the next year. So we expect to be in Brussels, but it's not fully accepted right now by the European Sustainable Energy Week in June. We will be in the UK, in Oxford, in March, in a conference on alternative energy sources. And we will be in the International Building Performance Simulation Conference in Rome, the CISBAT in Switzerland, IAQ in Bari, a heating HVAC system conference, and a Sustainable Built Environment Conference in Thessaloniki. All of this year. Of course, some of this is not fully accepted right now, but we are sure that some of these places we will go anyway. Of course, we do have our newsletters. We already had 2. We expect additionally to have additional 1 by this year, maybe 2. If the Covenant of Majors invites us again, we will of course be happy to present something in a webinar or something. Of course, some additional events, and we are happy to be contacted by any of you. So we can contact Ternalia or any of our other partners to ask about this project or any of our activity related to low temperature district heating systems or renewable energy systems or whatever. And if you want to get contacted by us or you want to get the webinar, just access our website and leave your email there so we can put you on the list for future communications. So, as said again, and to finalize it, I want to have a look at our partners. I am a proud partner of a proud coordinator of an interesting group of partners. So we do have the Danish Technical Institute, who is reference for district heating, low temperature district heating from Denmark. Fortum Tartu, Fortum is a well-known transnational utility company in Finland. We are partnering the district heating operator in Estonia, in Tartu, the city of Tartu. Beogradska Elektrane, Jurisa Vladik will talk after me, so you will have the opportunity to see their advances in district heating. The Basque government, who is also one of our other district heating network operators. Metrotherm, substation manufacturer, thermal booster manufacturer, Nive, heat pump manufacturer. Also, actually, Nive is owner of Metrotherm also. Aventa Solar, polymeric glazed solar collector manufacturer. IMAR Fachadas Singulares, who is doing unglazed solar collectors. The Basque Energy Agency, who is doing our regional studies for the Basque region in Spain. The Masovia Energy Agency for the same activity in Poland. The Institute of Baltic Studies for economic studies in this project. Fedarene, who does the dissemination at the EU level and also is hosting this webinar today. And Comunicaciones CIA, who is our main dissemination partner, who delivers the website and everything. So it's an interesting group of people who is gathered around the NEDS 2020 project and funded by the European Commission. And we will happy to tell everybody what we are doing. So please contact us or whatever. And now I leave the presentation here and I'm open to questions. Okay, so I don't know. There's one by Sharon Yousefi. So she was saying that if there's some waste heat from industry, there are some of our district heating networks who are doing this actually. So I will go to the map. Sorry, you can find it. Okay. So in Belgrade, they are using quite many waste heat sources. They are retrofitting a power plant to convert it into a CHP plant, and they are also doing waste from energy from waste plant also. And Tartu, they are doing different schemes. I mean, they are negotiating with different industries.
Roberto, can you hear me? Apparently there is a technical issue from your side.
Yes, I think we lost Roberto.
He's still there as a presenter,
So maybe what we could do is move to the pilot site. I'll let you, Melissa, and then we'll take the rest of the questions for Roberto once he gets back online.
yeah, we can answer the questions at the end. Exactly. So let's move to the next one. So we have with us Lubisa Vladic from Beolectrain, who was previously introduced already. Here, Lubisa. Yes, you can put on. Microphone as well. Yes. And you just have to put the microphone on now. So the microphone is still off. I think you just have to turn it on because the webcam is fine. We have an issue with the sound here as well.
Hello.
Perfect.
Okay, can I start?
Yes, hi. Yes, we can hear you very well. There's a bit of a sound
Very
in the
well.
background, but you can start.
I hear you very well, but Melissa, I can't hear her. Okay. Hello to everyone. Thanks for introduction. I'm the new member in this project and in charge for Belgrade site. I'm coming from Belgrade District Heating Company. Roberto presented overview and approach of related concepts, so I will present you demonstration site in Belgrade as one of the related projects. As first, I would like you to present basic data about my company. Belgrade District Heating operated by public utility company Beogradske Elektrane. It has 60 heat sources, installed capacity of 3 gigawatts, and the yearly energy production is 3.6 gigawatts hours. District heating network consists of 750 kilometers, and we have 8,500 substations, both in substations and network increasing every year. About activity related, we choose 5 residential blocks on the address Vinogradski Venac 36 and 1 primary school, United Nations, in the borough of Osip Street. Also, we consider large-scale interventions in network, transmission lines, and production facilities. Here is the picture of a substation and 5 buildings in Vinogradski Venac 36. There are buildings very close to each other and have a main substation in number 36 and secondary pipelines to each of those buildings. This is a technical scheme of substations for space heating and for domestic hot water. This is our typical concept of this type of substations. But in most cases, we have new heat plate exchangers for space heating. In this one, we have plate heat exchangers for domestic hot water and 2 old type tubes heat exchangers for space heating. Power of this substation is more than 1 megawatt, and we have radiators and domestic hot water, as I mentioned. About operating condition, we have the primary circuit on district heating side. We have 120 degrees in supply pipeline and 65 in return pipeline. On the secondary side, for the radiator heating, it is 90 degrees and 70 return pipeline. So if you can see, we have a very high temperature system, both in primary and secondary side, and our aim is to reduce that temperature. On this slide, you can see energy modeling. We made energy modeling for each building, and then analyzed delivered energy and heat demands. So conclusion is that we can reduce temperature range for space heating. This picture is of substation in United Nations primary school. Complex is very big, about 2,000 square meters, and a lot of potential on the roof for solar collectors. This is a scheme of substation in that school. This is substations for space heating, for domestic hot water, and for air heating. Power of substation, total power of substations is also more than 1 megawatt. And radiators, also we have radiators. It's also very old type of installation. Here is operating conditions for this substation. Also the same primary, secondary operating conditions. So about the intervention plan on our demonstration site is for first complex of Vinohradsky Venac is to reduce natural work temperature from high to low system. By that we verify comfort status in critical apartments and heat balance of network to be calculated. We plan to a lot of measuring and regulatory equipment to install. In the United Nations primary school, we have a lot of potential to increase domestic hot water consumption and also to reduce billing. We plan to implement a new technology using not free function substations, as Roberto mentioned. We try on this project to install 2 function substations, solar thermal. Heat pump is not possible to install in this substation because we have a very high temperature level on the secondary side. So it's all installations with radiators, so heat pump is not possible to install there. As I mentioned, we plan to install solar panels. We have a lot of roofs, sloped roof on the east, also in the west facing. We plan to reduction of heat by window replacement. It's an ongoing project, and also by installing thermostatic valves on the radiators. As a long-term plan, we plan new projects. Target is to replace natural gas as primary energy source with renewable energy sources, and to significantly reduce CO2. On this map of city, you can see that we have a lot of boiler houses, and the black one is the currently power plants. The other colors present what we plan to install beside power plants to replace natural gas. Our main target is renewable resources energy from solar thermal, from waste, biomass, and geothermal, and also we plan to install, we are working on that, on CHP plants. And thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask me.
thank you, Lisa, for this presentation. I noticed I had some issues with the microphone. Can you hear me better now?
Yep.
Yes, yes, excellent. Now.
Good to know. So we already have a question for you from Diego. I don't know. Organization. It says, what temperature work the geothermal plant?
We didn't have yet a geothermal plant, but we have a lot of potential for that, and we have approximately 40 degrees in that source of energy.
We have another one from Irina Tatu from What is the current fuel for the district heating system, or percentage of fuel mix if there are more?
Currently, we are using 90% of natural gas. Other 10% are coal. We have some biomass and something of heavy oil.
It seems people are very interested in this. There is another question from Andrea Gabaldon Moreno. Thank you for your presentation. How low can the temperature get in the district heating network when substations also include district heating?
Yeah, I understand. Yes, we'll try to reduce on the temperature level, which is important for domestic hot water, not for space heating. In the presentation, just to find, this is the operating conditions. We now have 120 degrees. For domestic hot water, we need 55 degrees. So we think that we can reduce in primary circuits on 75 or 80 degrees. In that case, we still have necessary temperature for domestic hot water, and we will reduce on secondary side for radiator heating, because we analyzed that we have a lot of reserve in radiator heating.
One before the general Q&A session. Still, if asks, where do you plan to use the electricity produced through the generator?
We have one ongoing project. It's here on the generation plant called Vozdovac. It's an ongoing project for CHP. Also, we plant CHP in the biggest generation plant, New Belgrade. And in that case of one more, it's a generation plant Serac. All of that generation plants currently have more than 300 megawatts, and we plan to install CHP 10 megawatts for heating and 10 megawatts for electricity.
Thank you. I think this is all about the specific technical questions of this demonstration site. Anyway, we can, yes, Irina, thank you. So we can move to the general discussion with our two other speakers, Ms. Roos and Roberto here. I see Roberto and the presenters. I don't see your microphone.
Melissa, we're losing you again.
So I see Roberto. Roberto, can we hear you?
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, Mrs. Roos. Bisa, you can also stay because there might be other questions for you.
I'm here.
So I suggest we first start with the questions to Roberto, since he was interrupted in his presentation at the end. I don't know if you were done explaining the integration of waste heat from industry or not.
Yes. Okay, so what I said is that there are some projects going in Belgrade regarding waste to heat plants, and also the conversion of an electric plant, power plant, into a CHP on one side, and that there were several possibilities in Tartu for different kinds of waste heat utilization. So those are not actual agreements between the district heating network and the power plants, or the factories themselves, but they do have 4 to 5 projects on the pipeline right now. So I expect that 1 to 2 or even 3 of them will happen during the lifetime of the project. So they were an ice skating rink on one side. That's not industrial, but there is quite a lot of reject heat from the cooling of the ice skating area and so on. There's also a printing factory. There is a food factory also, and a supermarket. And I think there's someone else, which I don't really remember now. So, but they do have continuous contact with factories and industries to perform what they call energy services, not, but in the end means injecting reject heat into the district heating network.
And another question for you from Stefano Alessandrini from Aria Science Park, saying, looking at an incinerator producing around 100,000 megawatt hours of electricity per year, how much thermal energy do you think it is possible to produce?
I didn't get the figures, but if you mean for the power plant, the performance levels of power plants, typical power plants, is around 30 to 35%. So, and the cycle is really high in temperatures. It's hundreds of degrees, maybe 300, 400, 500 degrees. So even the condenser is above district heating temperatures, or at least the return district heating temperatures. So there are some studies over there that with only small reductions in electricity production, you can get easily around almost, I would say, more than as much heat as electricity. So if you are saying 150 megawatt hour, for instance, you could get easily to 250 megawatts of thermal energy out of that power plant. But that also depends on the particular details on how the cycle works and what's the temperature of the condenser and so on.
Okay, thank you. Then I received a question from Alessia Andelini from the European Federation of Intelligent Energy Efficiency Services, addressed to Mrs. Hoos. So here is the question. In its proposal on the ERDF, the European Commission proposed to exclude from the scope of financing investments linked to the generation and distribution of fossil fuels. Is there any risk that this would hamper investment in networks today, mainly relying on heating produced through fossil fuels, although the investment will be aimed at decarbonizing networks and make them more efficient?
I believe the rationale is that at least from EU funds, there should no encouragement come to investing in new fossil fuel type of generation and infrastructure, because that risks to create a lock-in asset. So that means that the EU funds would not be available for that kind of investment. It doesn't prevent member states to such kind of investment if they want to. But this is really a signal that the goal is not to stay on fossil fuels for time. And since the age of these, the life cycle of these assets is very long, it's somewhere needs to be started.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Now I believe I only have one kind of question debate left. This is the question asked by Imre Rimossi from Budapest at the beginning. Several participants seem to agree that district heating companies want to sell more and more heat, and this way they're not interested in building insulation. So participants think it is a big problem. I think everybody can answer this. Do you have something to say? One of the three.
Okay, maybe I can give my position. I mean, I am not representing neither a district utility nor a policy-making body. So, in the end, what is clear is that there is a policy towards reducing the carbon footprint of the European Union, or of course, each of the countries, not only European Union, also Serbia and other countries. And so that means that in the end, we are making energy conservation measures, which means that there is less energy needed at the end point of the line, and we are also making energy efficiency investments into production and distribution and so on. So at some point there will be a reduction of the heat load in the district heating for the same amount of inhabitants, let's say. And on the other part, we are making efforts to reduce the cost of this heat, or the fossil fuels used in the equation. So as I see that's the context, and that's going to happen sometime, and in the process we do have district heating utilities that need to withstand there for many years, and we cannot subsidize those, so they have to make profit somehow. So they will reduce the load, and they will reduce the operational cost due to less use of fossil fuels. So it's not about selling more heat, but it's out of keeping profitability in every single year from now until it is a fully decarbonized system, somewhere 50 years in the future or so. But of course, there's different points of view from the others in this webinar, maybe.
Yeah, so maybe, I mean, this is of course, it's a natural, companies would like to make profit, so like to have more revenues and sell more. But I think this is a strategic choice there for companies. There is a clear trend for buildings to become more efficient, which is very much the goal of EU legislation on energy efficiency, certainly, to reduce the consumption of buildings. And we know that the building stock is currently very inefficient, and there is considerable for reducing the consumption easily by 30% or even 50% by just applying simple methods like better insulation top down in the building. So I think the strategic company thinking should be for district heating companies that they have a lot to gain now that EU policies have included them as a potential and a promising and inspiration to make them a key player in energy transition. That means that they should become really very efficient, very renewable based, very clean themselves. And their growth potential is not perhaps to increase the sales for individual buildings, but to build up their markets. So if they propose for consumers attractive products, that means that stable and affordable and clean energy, which is also more and more important for consumers, that they know that they do not pollute the environment. They have a lot to gain, and actually they can expand their market share. Also noting that, as the example of this project shows, district heating is able to competitively supply nearly zero energy buildings, so very efficient buildings, and this is actually one of the requirements towards them, that they should be able to connect and work with buildings that have very high energy performance in terms of energy consumption and low temperature heating system inside the buildings. If they can do that, that means that they would sell less for an individual building, but now they are going to be able, because they lower the temperature, to use renewable sources that otherwise are not available for district systems, such as solar thermal is obviously the case, geothermal in many respects, where the fields are low enthalpy, or low-grade waste heat, and many other sources. So these sources are going to be possible for this system to use if they become efficient, and if they foresee technology changes and innovation and investment to actually adapt themselves to the new type of very efficient buildings that are going to emerge more and more in the European. So that's a big business opportunity. It doesn't really mean that they will lose revenues. They can make a huge amount of new revenues and gain market share if they strategically appraise and prepare for the challenges that is for their business in the country.
Much, Sersbach, I think we'll close the discussion on this with his sentence. It says he agrees that DHC companies with renewables and installations will remain championed forever in the market, but they need some compensations. Spent enough time on this, we're pretty late. If you still have time though for a few questions, three of you, I think my was really interested in asking a few.
Yes, I always have questions. So everybody will hate me because your lunch needs to be postponed. No, so just two small questions actually. If we take a step back, where does related to this project on ultra low temperature district heating, where does this project fit in the digitalization and smartness of energy infrastructure trend? And how does this project move this agenda, the agenda of on these issues forward? So this would be a question more directed to you, Roberto, but as well, Yubisa, please feel free to answer, and Ms. Hoz as well, because I know the European Commission is digitalization for sustainable energy as well.
Yeah. Well, from my point of view, I mean, I have some insight on how the district heating networks in my project are operating, and also an idea on how stakeholders in the district heating sector are behaving. So actually, district heatings are digital, even fully digital as of today, or they have digitalization plans that will make them fully digital in the very short term, let's say 2 to 5 years from now. So Belgrade, I mean, Beogradska Elektrana is doing a really nice job. They have, was it like 8,000 substations in the city, and all of them are fully digitalized and modernized right now. And they do have a complete load forecasting for the actual day, so they know how much heat they have to send back and forth in the network many hours in advance. And I mean, maybe user can have a better idea on that, but they do have quite a skilled system, fully automated, to cope with this. And if we go to the case in Tartu, and even at the beginning of the project, we are doing a demonstration over one of the sub-networks, so it's roughly 50 buildings over there. And even before the starting of the project, more than 30 of them were actually controlled remotely. So they had hourly readings of these buildings from the main central control facility. And they did have an implementation plan to put all the remaining buildings in the city during a couple of years into this very same system. So actually 1 year later, and without doing anything, all this district is fully automated right now. And so we will be, I'm really happy as a project manager because we will have this subnetwork, we will be able to make a full heat balance of this subnetwork without doing any specific action to measure anything over there, because it's already done by the utility themselves. So it's happening. I mean, the digitalization is happening, and there are different approaches for each of the networks, but they are fully digital or will be in really short term.
About Beogradska Elektrane, we started digitalization a few years ago, and it's a very important task for us. Also, these related projects are absolutely fitted in our plans for digitalization, so we don't see any problem with that. We carry on with both digitalization and related projects.
Thank you. So we have one last question and then we'll end this webinar schedule, so sorry for that. It is still from, sorry if I don't pronounce it correctly, by the way. So, is your models, results and suggestions can be built in your city's CCAP? Do you communicate them to the responsible or city leaders about results? Roberto.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the question. Can you say it again, please?
Sorry.
Maybe I can read it.
So,
You can actually see it in the chat box. So is your models, results, and suggestions built in your city's CCAP? So do you communicate them to the responsible or city leaders about the results? Do you communicate these models, results, and suggestions so that they are embedded in the CCAPs?
Well, maybe that I don't really know what the decision operators are doing with this information. In our case, for sure, for the small district in Spain, this is not happening because this is a private facility. And for the others, maybe Yuvisa can say how they link with the municipality and so on. Actually, the municipality owns the Beogradska Elektrane, so I'm sure that they do have the management board. So I don't know.
Lisa, do you have something to add? Can you say if the cities are working on the CCAPs?
I'm not really quite sure about that because I'm new in that project, but for other projects we communicate with them, yes. We have the city responsibilities is also our owners, so we must in that cases communicate with them. I'm not sure for this project, but for other projects, yes, we do.
A lot for your time, your presentations. I think the fact that we have so many questions really shows that people are interested and that in a way there is hope to decarbonize the sector in the coming years. Do you have any last message you want to say to the people participating today before closing the webinar? Well, thank you everyone.
Well, I just wanted to say hello, thank you to all of you. So thank you, Mrs. Hoss, for coming to the webinar and presenting us the latest policy updates on the topic of district heatings. And also Luisa for joining us and presenting the activities we are doing in Belgrade, and also the broad idea of this network. And of course, people.
Thank you again to the three of you. As I said before, this webinar is recorded and will be available afterwards, and so will the slides. They will be sent to each participant by email. So we can now all go to our lunch break.
Thank you.